This woman is heading to prison for a shocking crime. She poisoned her husband with antifreeze to kill him, then set their home on fire to try to cover up her crime. The reason she did it was because of an affair, but just wait until I tell you who she was having an affair with. I promise you, you are not expecting it. And even though she is going to prison for years, people in her small town in Missouri are not happy about it. Why they say she is being let off easy and justice in this case is not being served. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. In stories like this, you find yourself asking, how does this happen? How does a woman end up committing a crime like this? And if she was so unhappy in her marriage that she would commit murder, why not just get a divorce? This story begins on December 14th, 2018 in small town Iberia, Missouri. On Facebook, firefighters write that at 1:15 in the morning, they responded to a house fire. Not only was the home burning, inside they found a man dead. His name was Josh Murray. Josh was a beloved member of this community. He was a father, he was a husband, he was a man of faith, and in his obituary, his wife, Amy, was listed as one of the people who survived him. On Facebook, as people in small town Missouri took in the news that he died, we see a comment, quote, "So sorry, Amy." Now, here's a picture of Amy, and I already told you at the top, she's the one who did it, but this story is far from over. The medical examiner determined that Josh died before the fire. According to KRCG-TV, which got the probable cause statement back in 2019, the medical examiner said Josh had been poisoned specifically by a chemical used to make antifreeze. Amy told police that she, their 11-year-old son, and 2 dogs went to McDonald's. Then about a half hour later, when they got home, that house was on fire. Remember, firefighters responded at 11:15 in the morning. Convenient timing, perhaps, for a late night snack and a fast food run. On Facebook, I found a comment from someone who said they were the 911 dispatcher who took the call early in the morning from Amy. And it reads, quote, "I took this 911 call. My first words when I hung up was, she killed her husband." Amy worked as a nurse at the Jefferson City Correctional Center. During the course of the investigation, it was discovered that there was one inmate that she was doing a lot more with than just treating professionally. I want you to meet Eugene Claypool. He was convicted of second-degree murder in 2001. He's currently serving a life sentence. Amy had hundreds of phone calls with this inmate. Like many of the stories involving jailhouse phone calls that we cover here on Law and Crime, you probably know by now, people who talk on phones in jail are being recorded. According to KRCG, Murray was heard on a recorded phone call talking to Claypool about not wanting to be around Josh, her husband, and getting a divorce. But then it goes further. After Josh's death, Murray told the inmate she wanted to marry him because her husband was now, quote, out of the picture. She also apparently talked about getting Claypool an attorney in hopes he would be able to get out of prison so they could be together. Before we get back to this episode of On the Case, there is a reason that On the Case is one of the most watched shows on all of YouTube. And there's a reason that Morgan & Morgan is the largest injury law firm in the entire country. They have more than 1,000 attorneys and a history of winning. They've recovered more than $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered $500,000. Even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 clicks on your phone. So if you've been injured, you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. Also scan the QR code on your screen or click the link below. On February 7th of 2019, roughly 2 months after the fire and her poisoning of Joshua, Amy Murray was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and arson. Not only that, she was also charged with multiple sex crimes for allegedly sleeping with an inmate in prison. According to court records, that case is still pending, and there's a show cause hearing scheduled for next month. As for the murder case of Josh Murray, Amy was arrested in 2019 And it took until last week, more than 6 years later, for there to be a resolution, and it is one that people are not happy about. Here's part of a letter that a member of Josh's family wrote last year to the court. Not only does the letter talk about how Amy was able to post bond and was walking free with the charges pending, and that Josh was a man of faith who owned his own business, it goes on to say, quote, "I wish to express my deep frustration with the speed at which the system has moved in this case. Each and every time the defense has asked for a continuation, it has been granted. This is not justice. Where's the justice for the victim's family? We are suffering each year that this trial is delayed." According to KRMS Radio in Missouri, one of the times the trial was delayed was because it was moved out of Miller County where this crime took place. This past week, Amy accepted a 12-year sentence for the murder of her husband in what's called an Alford Plea, which means she accepts the conviction, but she still maintains her innocence, that she admits that there is a lot of evidence that would have led to her conviction had this gone to trial. So instead, she'll take the plea deal instead of being found guilty. And we are seeing a lot of reaction to this ruling on social media from people who knew Josh and knew this case. One person who said he was a first responder on this case wrote, quote, "I've worked a lot of dark cases in my time as an investigator, but none will ever compare to what happened on December 11th, 2018 in Iberia." He went on to say the criminal justice system, it's a joke. In the end, there were only two winners, the defense attorney and Miss Murray, who got to spend the last 6.5 years with her son. A member of Josh's family posted this picture with a post about how upset they are with the outcome of the case, writing, quote, "The police, the first responders, the investigators all did their job, but money talks." While it was satisfying to hear the handcuffs finally snap on her wrists, Josh and his family have still been cheated. There is no punishment that will ever heal what has been broken. And even the judge acknowledged that this was not a worthy punishment. Are we glad this is over? Yes, of course. Do we wish things could have ended differently? Absolutely. But as wronged as his family is, nobody was more wronged than Josh himself and his son. And it's for the two of them that we all still pray for and still hope that one day we can be part of his life again. And, quote, "In the meantime, this is my personal message to Amy. I pray one day you see your wrongdoings. I hope that you lay your head down every night with the thought of how truly lucky you have been to watch your son grow up and to acknowledge the absolute travesty you created by taking that little boy's father from him. The amount of inner turmoil he must go through, I can't even imagine. Shame on you. Not that I believe you hold an ounce of shame in your body. I do truly hope and pray that one day you find forgiveness in Jesus, that you own your guilt and seek him, because I honestly don't know that you'll ever get it from our family. But that's between us and God. Your deeds are now between you and God. You got lucky with judgment today. Your privilege on this earth let you escape your punishment with next to no real consequence. But one day you will meet our Father, and you will find that he is not so easily escaped. You will face his judgment. Joining us now to talk about this story is Justin Perperny, prison consultant. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to join us on Law and Crime and on our show On the Case. We really appreciate it. Just first, what's your reaction when you hear this story of a woman who kills her husband but was having this intimate relationship with a convicted murderer in prison?
I think it's terrible. I'm feel terrible for the victim. It goes to show how isolation, control, and secrecy inside of a prison environment can really distort judgment, and it can allow these sorts of things to happen. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon. Most of the time, it doesn't result in a nurse conspiring to poison and kill her husband and then burn the home down under the guise that there was a fire. But prison guards and staff are frequently getting in trouble with other prisoners. So many of them are unfortunately going to prison. So it doesn't surprise me. And until there's real change inside of state and federal facilities, you can continue to see these tragic events happen.
This happened in a state facility in Missouri. The inmate is Eugene Claypool. In the early 2000s, he was convicted of second-degree murder. He's serving a life sentence. And he ends up working in some capacity in the area where this nurse was working. How does someone get a job in prison? What's that process? And does their conviction, no matter how long ago it was, matter in whether or not they get the type of job like he was here apparently working in some sort of healthcare of the prison?
When you go to prison, you're going to be go through an intake process, and they're going to look at your probation reports and assess how healthy you are, your age, medications. Do you have the capacity to work in recreation or the chow hall or commissary or pick weeds or scrub pots and pans or toilets? So they're going to assess. Then they're going to give you a job. And the longer you are there, the more credibility or authority you may actually have. There are tiers in a federal and state prison. The higher the tier, the more responsibility also, the more money you're going to make. So he might have been in a position, I don't know if he had disciplinary infractions or other trouble, but absolutely every prisoner, if you're healthy enough, you're going to work. And the more successful you are in that job, the better reports or write-ups you have, the more responsibility you may also have, which could put you front and center in front of staff. Indeed, a lot of jobs, whether it's from a federal camp to a state penitentiary, are going to put you around staff, emptying the trash from your counselor's office, scrubbing floors inside of the nurse's office. And through that are going to come interactions, friendships, and in some instances, deathly romances.
And when you think of the types of jobs that people can have in prison, working, where does the job that he apparently had, where he was close with this nurse, compare to something I imagine someone whose job was to clean the toilets?
It's probably a better job, which tells me he's been in prison for a while, might have been avoiding disciplinary infractions, built up a record in one institution where they can say, regardless of the decisions that led him to prison, he's building a record on the inside that gives him perhaps more liberty, a job that could be easier, more responsibility around staff. Certainly, that's a harder job than a lot of new prisoners will endure, which is scrubbing toilets, scrubbing showers, serving food in the buffet line in the chow hall 3 times a week. So the longer you're there, and he'd been in prison for a very long time, the more responsibility that's going to come. And it would be naive to think that conversations naturally aren't going to start and boundaries are going to erode and manipulations can take root and romances begin.
Because Amy Murray, and as much as I talk about Eugene Claypole, he's a convicted murderer. I mean, she's the person in this story that is the crux of what happened to her husband Josh, who loses his life. A lot of people are upset that she was able to get an Alford plea on this, but I think of this relationship that she had with Eugene Claypole in prison, and prison's a place where I assume that there's cameras, they're recording things, there's oversight. What type of oversight is there in prison for someone who's a nurse and then the inmate who's in some ways under their watch?
Well, first off, I can agree with people upset over the Alford plea. Wow, 12 years is a pretty good deal, all things considered. Someone lost their life here. The problem here is while they're in a higher security institution, they are not monitoring communications enough amongst staff and prisoners. Sure, emails are saved, phone calls can be listened to, but that doesn't mean they're reading the emails, nor does it mean they're sitting in a golf cart in the yard listening to the actual phone calls. They have algorithms with AI. There may be keywords or buzzwords that are going to pop up. Let's trigger that phone call. Oftentimes, investigations between staff and a prisoner will kick off by a prisoner who looking to get cooperation credit may inform against the prisoner or staff member to get some credit, perhaps an earlier release. So I think even in a higher security institution, you can spend a lot of time communicating with staff, and through that friendships are going to form. And when she would go home and they would communicate, it's clear they reached a point or grew confident, like, hey, they're not getting it, they're not listening. And then after they get away with it for a while, it just emboldens them to like double down in their conduct. We're all good. And then of course they go back and listen to the tapes and the evidence. It's the reason she took this sweetheart Alford plea, because the evidence was so overwhelming. Can you imagine playing that in front of a jury? My husband's out of the picture. It's game over. So they should be monitoring the communications along the way rather than being very reactionary, which is what corrections tend to be, very reactionary.
Yeah, there's just so many questions about how this case went the way it did. And a lot of people, it seems, from just the comments that I've been following, are just confused as to not just the Alford plea, but she got out on bond, $750,000. She was able to post that for the last 6.5 years, as she's been facing a murder charge. She's been out on bond, but now is headed to prison for at most 12 years under this Alford plea. She is facing some sex crimes in a case that appears to still be active. And one of the charges she's facing is sexual abuse. What does that tell you, considering, according to these court records, that she was intimate with this inmate in the prison? What could that case look like based off what you know?
Quick thought based on what you said. It's surprising that she tried to set up the death as the home burning down, which speaks to obstruction of justice, bad
Yep.
continuing conduct, which I was stunned she's been out on bond. And in retrospect, she'll wish she was in this entire time because she'd have half of her sentence done. The the problem we have is her conduct puts her in a position where she is not believable. And I think part of the reason they're going after her, perhaps for the sex offense, is some people are upset over the 12 years, and it could be a way for them to tack on another 5 or 8 years to get more prison time out of her. But I've certainly seen circumstances where guards, both male and female, have been arrested and charged for harassing, as some would say, an inmate. A lot of the times, both the prisoner and staff will say it was consensual. I served time in a lowly minimum security camp, and there was a relationship where a nurse had a relationship with someone serving time for a white collar offense. It was a physician. They were caught. Both said it was consensual. Had she said he assaulted me, that could have been a new charge, a higher security prison, and same thing on the other side for her. So I think this is an opportunity for them to get more prison time, because it does not always lead to a staff member or nurse getting arrested or indicted for assault or
You
some
just
sort of sexual offense or something like that.
For sure, and you're a familiar face here on Law and Crime, and I know a lot of time, one of the great things that you bring to us is kind of an understanding of the dynamics of what is going on in prison. I don't know if I've ever asked you before, what is your background, and how you got into the role of prison consulting today?
So I graduated USC as a student athlete, baseball player in 1997. I began building my career at Merrill Lynch, Bear Stearns, and then UBS. Had a lot of opportunity and privilege that I squandered because several years into my career, I found myself making bad decisions on behalf of a client who ran a hedge fund. When I learned of the fraud, I didn't stop it. I enabled it. I turned the other way for money. An investigation began when the FBI showed up at my home in April 2005. I lied or obstructed the investigation. That led to formal charges. After 3 long years, I was eventually sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security camp. And at my sentencing hearing, Judge Stephen Wilson said, "I am tired of salesmen turning the other way for money. Most don't get caught. You did." Then when I went to prison, I realized how far I had fallen, opportunities that I had squandered. And along with my partner, Michael Santos, who will be in my home in a few minutes, who served 26 years in prison, I began learning from him, and we began building this business that helps defendants traverse a government investigation. Don't double down. Don't make matters worse. And if you did it, don't rationalize or excuse. Say, "I'm sorry. Here's how I will do better." And I've been doing it since I went to prison in '08. Thank you for asking.
No, and you do a great job just in helping us understand a world that so many of us haven't experienced, but we certainly talk about it a lot from the outside. I look at Amy Murray, and here's someone who has not been in prison. To your point with this Alford plea, she probably, with the way the court system was going, could have half of her sentence done by
Mhm.
this point if she had taken it. That's a great point. She also is someone who worked on the other side. I mean, she wasn't a guard, but here she is. She's going to be going into prison as someone who worked for the system. What danger could she be in danger? What precautions could be put in place around her when she heads to, this will be a state prison, unsure which one, I'm sure not the same one as Eugene Cleveland.
Mhm. So a lot of these state prisons aren't going to have, they may have protective custody or isolation, but that's really you sitting in the shoe or the hole. It's not an environment that I would wish for anyone. So certainly case managers or even some former wardens and guards are going to prison for bad conduct. I think part of it is how her reputation as a nurse. Healthcare in the federal and state prison system is a national embarrassment, right? People tend to not care about people in prison. Therefore, they might not get the treatment they need. Plus, it's expensive, especially in a broke state. So, was she a nurse that was kind and thoughtful and did her job? Did she go above and beyond to help prisoners get their medications when they were in need? Or if a prisoner was lacking or wanting something, did she say, "Sorry, you should have thought about that before you broke the law. Get out"? So, certainly her reputation, as the cliche holds, will precede her. And she should recognize, because the high profile nature of the case, together with some women in that prison, may load the fact that she got 12 years. You can call it second degree, you can call she premeditated murdered this person. There ain't no doubt about it. We got to own that. And a lot of people in that prison would say, "How are you not here for 40 years or 50 years? This is unjust. This is unfair. Something has happened." So she's going to have to understand her environment, stay quiet, keep her mouth shut, watch, study, not try to influence the environment. And remember, she is no longer a staff worker. When we get a call from a former caseworker or guard on their way to prison, they use words like inmates and inmate manipulated me. And I say, "Hold on, you are going to be a prisoner. No, stop thinking like a case manager. You are on your way to prison." So she's going to have to respond differently and really be alert, because all eyes will be on her. And one mistake could derail any progress she hopes to make, including some potential violence if some of the women are jealous over the length of her sentence or the way she may have behaved as a nurse.
Right, because to your point, I mean, if you have people who are spending, I mean, Eugene Claypool was found guilty of second degree murder. He's serving a life sentence, and then you meet someone who has 12 years. It sounds, she'll have a life after prison. We'll see how the sex crimes case plays out. In your experience, what type of personal, and not that you had the type of personal relationship we're talking about here, but just in general, talking with staff and talking with guards, what is the relationship between guards and inmates, staff and inmates, when it comes to knowing about someone's life on the outside?
It can happen. I will quickly say, I think her lawyers did a very good job. They had to have had of arguing some manipulation, some being swept in by this prisoner convicted of murder. So something had to have happened in order for her to get this sort of plea in only 12 years. Communications in prison is very common amongst staff and prisoners, and many of them take it home and the communications continue. In some instances, I'll note people will live like a double life inside of the prison. A case manager and guard will form a friendship or a relationship with a case manager or with a prisoner. Then they'll go home and they will totally shut it down. It will stop as if they're living a totally different life. Then they come back to this environment. It's like, here we are again. We can be close. And I've heard of a number of those instances where this is only going to happen when we are here. I'm not calling you when I go home. When you get released, there is no continued communication. It is only here while we're working together. And it's like, working together, you're a prisoner. I'm supposed to be overseeing you. So when you're in this controlled, secretive, manipulative, weird environment of corrections where both prisoners and staff had myriad mental health issues, if anyone forms a connection, terrible things can happen. Which is why there's got to be more. I say it on every time I do Law&Crime. More training of both staff and prisoners, more checks and boundaries of monitoring mail and email and communications. And that could include following the communication when someone goes home if they've been put on the radar.
What type of access do inmates typically have to communication devices, whether it's phone calls, visits, and then emails to people on the outside? Because apparently they made hundreds of phone calls over the times that they were having this relationship.
So they have access to a lot of communication. Of course, prisoners can very easily obtain an iPhone or an iPad. So you're going to have phone minutes every month in the prison system through the phone. Now, those phone calls are recorded, but as I said earlier, it doesn't mean they're listening. One of the biggest problems in federal and state prisons is the iPhone, of course, because continued criminal activity continues. It wouldn't surprise me if this prisoner had an illegal iPhone or iPad or something that enabled them to continue. In fact, some cases that I have seen with a case manager or guard working with having a relation, they do that because they can see each other. They can share inappropriate photos. You can do things through the screen share that you can't do on a regular payphone. It is not hard to get in an iPhone or something like that. And oftentimes it is a staff member. Many staff members are good and do it the right way, but in any business, there's going to be anomalies and people that go rogue. Oftentimes you'll have a staff member bringing in the phone. And we saw that. We get those calls every week here at White Collar Advice. Last week, a husband and wife guard called to say they're going to prison for 2 years. They began to bring in iPhones to prisoners for extra money. That prisoner then blackmailed them. Before you know it goes bad, they're going to prison. There is so much contraband and it's not even abnormal anymore. It's everywhere, which is how they were able to communicate so easily.
Wow. I also think too, and to your point about the training and what can be done, Amy Murray is someone now in hindsight should not have been hired by this prison. And I look at the places where a lot of these prisons are, not that there aren't great people in these communities, but they're small communities where places like in this one, Iberia, Missouri, where it was located. I mean, even like a Supermax in Florence, Colorado. How do you recruit quality employees in places that, unless you probably grew up there, it's not the top spots, all due respect, for people wanting to move to?
It's very hard to get people to work in corrections. It's a weird, odd, I feel like I have a weird, odd life. It's a weird, odd life to work in corrections. It's very difficult to get people to work there because of the mental health issues, together with how little they may actually get paid, $50, $60, $70,000. Some federal prisons are closing because they can't get staff to work there. Programs are shut down in places like Sheridan, Oregon. It's expensive to live in Oregon with high taxes. A guard can't afford to live on 70 grand a year. So for that reason, you got to take what you can get. And if that means you have a GED or high school diploma and you're able to pass some basic training, guess what? You are a guard, or in this case, you are qualified to be a nurse. It's very difficult to get people to work in corrections based on how little money they make in some of these towns they reside in. And it's the reality of it. And they can't spend more money to pay more because, there's only so much money these broke states have. I mean, look at we have these riots. So we have prisoners escaping all across the country, holes in the walls, terrible training. They don't have any money.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know we've talked about, and at the time of this recording, 9 out of the 10 inmates who escaped the jail in New Orleans, there's still one on the run. And we've talked a lot about some of the issues in that facility and how it expands out across the country. Lastly, when you look at training, you look at this case, for as unique to those of us on the outside as it may be, what can be done to prevent relationships like this happening and then spiraling into, unfortunately, the death of a man at the hands of his wife?
When someone joins our team, they go through all of our content as much as they can. They study it. They have a quiz. We have interviews. We understand. We make sure they know the messaging. That's what good businesses do. Well, that's what corrections should do. It's not we've hired you, you've gone through a 2-week orientation, and just like that, you are a nurse or a guard in front of people who have been criminogenic in and out of prison their entire life. If you're weak, if you don't understand your tendencies as a person, you are going to be exploited. You are going to be taken advantage of. So it's great to say on television we have new training programs. It sounds good for the taxpayers and stakeholders. But until there's real accountability and can confirm in these people's files that they understand the messaging, they understand their weaknesses, understand why these people are in prison, and they should be focused on the victims and the length of the sentence, while also recognizing they can build a new record and earn their way home from prison without question. Until we have these checks and balances and real training, we're going to continue to see a staff member manipulating a guard or a prisoner or vice versa. And it's just going to continue, and we'll continue to do these unfortunate videos. And in some cases, it's just an escape. In some cases, it's just a relationship. The case in Europe, it's having sex with an inmate. In this case, someone died. And it's going to continue to it's going to get to a point where they say, we've got to address it. And they're going to ask for more money. They say, we ain't got it. And here we are. We have the same problem again.
No. Justin Paperny, thank you for your time, prison consultant. It's always great insight to have here on Law and Crime.
Good to see you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.